So given all this, what should have been the general character of military strategy? Some people say the South should have just remained on the defensive. Should the South have tried to defend all its territory? Maybe they should have just withdrawn. In other words, how should some strategists say the Confederacy made a mistake in fighting as if it was already an independent nation. Fighting what they should have fought was a war of national liberation, as they call it in the 20th century, where you don't really have major battles. Like, you avoid battle, you retreat, you let the enemy come in, you attack him from the side, you have irregular forces going in, like happened in the American Revolution. The British had no problem marching around, nobody could stop them, but what do you accomplish doing that? And wherever they went, they're attacked from the rear, they're attacked from the side, their supply line. Maybe some people said they should have done that. That's what the Confederacy should have done. You fight a guerrilla war, so to speak, and you wear them out. You don't win major battles, but you wear out their will to fight. Now, in fact, the Confederacy basically adopted a defensive strategy. As I said, there were occasional thrusts into the North, but not that many, and each time resulting in casualties they couldn't really afford. Yeah, well, there's Robert E. Lee, of course, the great Confederate commander in the East, a brilliant tactician, and a kind of tortured soul in that he was a slave owner. And in fact, Lee is highly romanticized, but he was a very brutal slave owner. There's testimony of some of his former slaves about all the whippings that went on at his plantation and this sort of thing. Lee was not that nice a guy, but he was one of these Virginians who was questioned whether slavery should survive forever, and was very loyal to the Union, but more loyal to Virginia. And when Virginia seceded, he decided he had to go with them. He fought the entire war in Virginia, which was totally appropriate. Lee was a great tactician on the battlefield. He didn't have a broad conceptual sense of the war. He wasn't interested in the war in the West, which was equally important. He never sort of recommended to President Jefferson Davis a kind of coordinated war effort where the different Confederate armies. He was interested in his army in Virginia. He did very well there, but the Confederacy lacked the kind of coordination that the Union will eventually come up with. So he defended Richmond. He fought off many invading Union generals. But was that the right thing to do? As I say, there are some who say, no, they should have given up Richmond. Why move the capital? They moved the capital to Richmond once Virginia seceded. Why put the capital there? Why leave it in Montgomery where it started? Let the Union have to go a long way to get Richmond's only about 80, 90 miles from Washington, D.C. What about the idea that the South should have fought a guerrilla war? Well, here, of course, is where slavery comes into the picture. A great Italian scholar of military history, Raimondo Loraghi, wrote a book about the American Civil War, which can be summarized, it's very long and in Italian, but it can be summarized in this little aphorism. Slavery created the Confederacy, and slavery doomed the Confederacy. Why did it doom it? Because it made it impossible to fight the kind of war that they could have won. See, a guerrilla war requires the support of the population, right? Mao Zedong said that. Many others said that. You need the support of the surrounding population. The guerrilla is a civilian, then becomes military, then he fades away. You can't quite figure out where they are, who they are. If local people inform, if the Union, and they say, hey, all those guys, that family over there, no, then you're not going to get anywhere. You need the tacit support of the... But in the South, you've got 3.5 million people who want the other side to win. You do not have the support of all of your population. Much of it is against you. And indeed, when the Union Army comes into areas over and over, slaves tell them, this is where they're hiding their weaponry. This is a road over here. How did Grant figure out how to get around, one of the great maneuvers of the war, how to move his army around Vicksburg to lay siege to it? Slaves told him how to do it. it was all swampland. Slaves told him where he could move his army. In other words, the existence of slavery makes it impossible to fight that kind of irregular war that might have defeated the Union for the Confederacy. So Lauraghe slavery made it impossible for the South to win, even though it created it in the first place. I remember visiting Lauraghe once. He had a wonderful house in the Alps, the Italian Alps, the Val d'Aosta, way up in the Alps. Beautiful, beautiful area. And he took me on a walk up there where he's showing me, like he shows me, this is where Hannibal came through with his elephants. How many, 2,000 years ago or more? Hannibal with elephants. I mean, if he turned up today with elephants, it would be pretty astonishing, crossing over the Alps into Italy. And then he would show me from way up, there's the Autostrada, there's a river, the Autostrada goes over there, and then there's the old Roman road. You can still see the outlines of the Roman road. Whenever it rains, the Autostrada is flooded. The Roman road never floods. The Romans knew how to build roads. The modern Italian government does not, apparently. And in fact, one of his aphorisms was, this is nostalgia, you know, if the Romans had had the steam engine, we would still be ruling the world, you know? But I guess not. Well, what about the Union? All right, given all this I'm talking about, what should be the Union strategies here? Well, as I said, most of the early generals were traditionalists. They thought you occupy territory. In fact, they didn't want to fight that much, which is a humane thing. They wanted to build up a gigantic army, maneuver it around, and convince the South they couldn't win. Win without a giant battle. Just show them how powerful you are, and they will negotiate and end the war and come back to the Union. Certainly don't attack slavery or any other aspect of Southern society. They didn't realize that Lee's army was the target, not just territory. They didn't realize that the will to fight had to be destroyed to win the war, and that slavery had to become a target of the war. Now, Lincoln, the commander-in-chief, right, under the Constitution, was not a bellicose person. He did not hunt, even though he grew up on the frontier. He didn't like violence. He grew up on the frontier. He didn't hunt. He was not a hater of Indians like many people on the frontier. He had no military experience. He was the captain of a militia unit somewhere in the early 1830s in Illinois during what they called the Black Hawk War. It wasn't really much of a war, but he never saw any action. He said, I fought mosquitoes, but that was about it. But the irony is his entire presidency takes place in war, right? Even though he's not a war person at all. He had no military training. He didn't go to West Point or anything like that. In a way, it's like Obama, right? Obama didn't serve in the military or anything, but his entire presidency is with war going on. Lincoln learned very quickly. He was a quick learner. He figured out very quickly that the traditional view was wrong, that you don't concentrate your forces, that to use the North's manpower advantage, you've got to embark on what they call a cordon offense. You've got to attack in many places at the same time. If you build up your force in one place, the Confederacy will be able to meet you, no problem. If you attack in many places, somewhere they're not going to have enough men. You use your manpower advantage by simultaneous attacks. That requires a lot of coordination, but the generals didn't quite figure that out. In fact, not until 1864 did he find a general, Grant, who said, we are going to attack all along the line, he said. And there will be a place we will break through because they don't have enough men to defend all along the line. Now, that will mean tremendous casualties on the attacking side, but it will eventually win the war, he says. Use your superiority in manpower. Lincoln also understood that occupying Richmond wasn't the goal of the war. It was to destroy Lee's army. He wrote in 1863, showing a real strategic grasp of it. He said, to avoid misunderstandings, to one of his generals, let me say that to fight the enemy back into his entrenchments at Richmond and then capture him is an idea I have been trying to repudiate for quite a year. I have constantly desired the Army of the Potomac, that's the Northern Army, to make Lee's army and not Richmond its objective. If our army cannot fall upon the enemy and hurt him where he is, it is plain to me that it can gain nothing by trying to follow him over a succession of entrenched lines into a fortified city. Lincoln also understood, of course, the importance of the border area. Remember, we'll talk a lot about the border next time. 4 slave states, Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware, remain in the Union. Lincoln says, if they secede too, our task is too big. We must keep those border slave states in the Union. That is one of the reasons he goes slowly on the slavery issue in 1861, because of the need to make sure the border doesn't secede, and then nobody knew what they were going to do. That's political. In other words, Lincoln sees the interrelationship of politics and warfare, but he also has a very shrewd grasp of Northern public opinion. You cannot just tailor your policy to the most conservative part of your coalition, the border states. He understands the radicals represent an important part of Northern public sentiment. He's got to give them things too. So Lincoln is always trying to figure out what I've said before, the lowest common denominator. What will get the widest support from all parts of the wartime coalition? The Emancipation Proclamation, of course, which we'll see, is the best example of the intersection of politics and warfare. It's both a military action and a political action at the same time.